As you can see, I got my Festool outfit on. Even got the little fanny pack. See this hat? Top of the line. Way better than your hat. What'd you pay, like 10 bucks? 400. So you know it's better. I'm just gonna go ahead and put on my Festool safety glasses and we'll get started. Actually, I can't see the camera guy with these things on. So I was watching that Whisper guy and he was making a tabletop, and when he whipped out that Festool Domino, man, I nearly wept. That thing is beautiful. It's sleek, it's stylish, it's got moves like a jungle cat. It's like the John Travolta of your woodworking power tools. Anyway, it looks like a biscuit joiner at first glance, but that is way off. It's a handheld, loose mortise and tenon machine. And I believe it also makes cappuccino. I wanted one. So, I headed over to Rockler to check it out. Do you have any idea what those suckers cost? Let's just say a lot of woodworkers spend less on their table saws. Way less. So I'm standing there trying to figure out how many tacos I could buy with all that lettuce, when it occurred to me, why not just do what I always do? Why not make my own solution? So that's what we're going to do this week. Now the way the Domino works is pretty simple. It has a spinning bit that vibrates from side to side as it plunges into the workpiece, turning a small round hole into a nice long oval one, which fits the pre-cut dominoes. So, for our own, we're going to need a bit, we're going to need a way to spin it, we're going to need a way to vibrate it from side to side, and we're going to need a way to plunge it. I think we can handle this. The obvious answer for the bit is one of those upcut spiral bits that you use for making mortises on the router. And then the obvious way to spin the bit is with a router, but not just any router, one of those small compact trim routers, because you can buy those things for like 20 bucks on sale at Harbor Freight. And I just happen to have one of the older orange versions laying around the workshop. Smells like China. So we're going to use this for our homemade domino machine. Now this is a cheap router, but that doesn't mean I want to leave it in the machine. I'm going to have to make some kind of mount that lets me pull it out when I want to use it for something else. Mounting it is only the first part. We have to make it plunge forward. That's no problem either. A long time ago, when I was a much younger and slightly thinner Nubs, one of the first projects we made on this podcast was a benchtop biscuit joiner, which I still use all the time. It has a carriage that runs on a pair of ball bearing drawer slides. We can use that same idea in this project. The router will mount inside a wooden carriage, which will sit in an outer box, which will run on a pair of drawer slides so that the whole thing can plunge forward into our workpiece. Where it plunges forward, that's going to be determined by the fence. And that design won't be any problem at all, because we're just going to copy the fence that was on that old biscuit joiner that we tore apart when we made the benchtop version. With some carefully positioned slots and some wing nuts, we can make a wooden version that adjusts for angled cuts and adjusts up and down to determine how far the mortise is from the face of the workpiece. Now, the whole project isn't easy. In fact, the hardest part was coming up with an idea for that side-to-side motion. I had a couple of ideas, but I found this guy in Russia who beat me to it. That's right, the Russians are into dominoes, and this looked pretty cool. So, with the risk of starting another Cold War, I put on a disguise and headed over to the YouTubes for a covert look. What I found over there was a great looking jig that dealt with that side-to-side motion issue in an ingenious way. He created a pivot point at the front of the router, allowing him to rock it from side to side as he plunged it forward. I didn't like the way a couple of things were done, like the way he tracked his carriage, and I thought a couple of things were a little overcomplicated, but I incorporated a couple of his ideas into mine, especially that pivoting motion. That was pure genius. Now the pivot is controlled by a triangle shape cut out in the bottom of the router mount, which lines up with the slot in the carriage below it. A bolt that runs in the slot can be adjusted forward and back. Forward if you want your mortises to be wider, back if you want them to be narrower. My version is a little simpler than his, but the credit for the idea has to go to him, and that's niet kruka. So, I'm going to throw this thing together, and I'll be right back. While I got you here, I want to talk to you about this whole Festool rigmarole. We all like to make jokes. A while back, if you remember, I made a video about Festool.
He once got a splinter just to feel the wood in his veins.
Check it out over at StumpyNubs.com if you haven't seen it already. It was poking fun at him a little bit.
Charles Neal once called him with a finishing problem.
It's true, he did.
The premise was that only the finest woodworkers in the world are allowed to use Festool. And it was based upon the Dos Equis commercials that were the most interesting man in the world.
He's been called a woodworker, not a fighter. But he's also a fighter, so don't get any ideas.
Watch out.
I actually entered it into a Festool contest where they were looking for promotional videos for their products. I guess mockery wasn't what they were really looking for.
His mustache alone has built more than a lesser woodworker's entire body.
Now before I get the Festool freaks to jump all over me, I'm not saying there's a thing in the world wrong with their tools. In fact, if money was no object, I think I'd have 2 of everything they have. I just find that some woodworkers get their hands on a premium tool like that and it goes right to their heads. It's like they're snorting that green paint. Want to have some fun? Head over to one of the Festool forums and post some Harbor Freight coupons. It's like kicking a beehive. Those guys have no sense of humor. We get it. Your $1,000 router is better than my $40 one.
He once punched a Harbor Freight clerk. That's right. You heard me.
Now this isn't a commentary about the company, or about the tools, or even about 80% of the people who use them. 60%. 50% of the people who use them. It's about the hoity-toity frou-frous that get a Festool sander and suddenly they're making fun of you because you still use a Black & Decker one.
It is said he can disassemble any tool blindfolded, but getting them back together is iffy.
They're the same people who wore Wrangler jeans all through junior high school, and then one day they show up wearing a pair of Calvin Kleins like they're king of the lunchroom. We all know that your mama bought those at the yard sales in the rich neighborhoods. What, suddenly you're no good for your sister's hand-me-downs? Please. The point is, we all know Festool makes good stuff. We all want some. But our stinking kids need to eat at least 2 meals a day, and have you seen the price of cold ones lately?
He can drink denatured alcohol, and it's said he has never gone blind.
Don't do that.
So, if you're lucky enough to own a premium tool, stop rubbing it in. You don't have to get out every time we come over and tell us how you wish you'd gotten one years ago. The reason why you didn't get one years ago is because it wasn't so easy to sell kidneys in the 80s. You can do a lot now that we have eBay. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to wait until you need dialysis money. And then I'm going to buy yours from half price.
He's Stumpy Nubs, the finest woodworker in the world.
Even the most simple of tools should come nestled in their own custom carrying case. That's Festool, my friend. That's all I got to say about that. Well, she's all set and ready to go. I used 1/2-inch Baltic birch because I figured a tool like this deserved the very best. So let's see how it works. Like I said, it uses a 1/4-inch upcut spiral rotor bit, which I picked up from Rockler. The Festool version has different sizes, but it's hard to find upcut spiral rotor bits bigger than a 1/4 inch for a trim rotor. So this is going to be limited to just the one size. The fence adjusts up and down to set the distance from the board face that you're going to be cutting your mortise. I made some marks on the side of my fence so that I could quickly set it for common thicknesses of wood. I also put a mark at the center of the fence that lines up with the center of the bit. This is the same way a biscuit joiner works. You draw a line on both workpieces where you want the center of your mortise to go, and then you just match it up with the line on the machine. Now, how wide I want that mortise is controlled by this screw underneath. Forward for wide, backward for narrow. There's a little cursor on the back with some more marks so I can set those widths. It took some trial and error to figure out where to put all these marks, but now that it's done, and setup is a lot faster from now on. The depth of the mortise is set by tightening a wing nut here on the back. That will restrict how far the carriage moves forward on the drawer slides. Now Festool's loose tenon stock, stuff they call dominoes, it's metric. Now I get it. That's why they call them dominoes. Because the way those little loose tenons look like the breadsticks you get from Domino's Pizza. Anyway, it's metric, and that's just not going to work with our 1/4-inch router bits. Think that's going to stop us? Heck no. We'll just make our own on our router table with a round-over bit and some scraps from the project we're using. And it'll cost us next to nothing. In fact, I just make it in long pieces, and then I cut off what I want for a particular mortise and tenon joint, and I always have it around. So, is this homemade version as good as the Festool Domino? No. I'd be stupid to stand here and say that a homemade jig I built myself for like $50, including the router, is the same as a $1,000 tool. It only cuts 1/4-inch mortises, at least until I find a 1/2-inch bit for a trim router, and I'm sure the Festool one is more powerful and probably easier to use. But for those of us who can't justify the real thing, because maybe we won't use it that often, or we just can't afford it, well, this can be a great introduction to the world of handheld mortising machines. It may be all you need. It may get you hooked and you'll start saving up for the big guns down the road. The point is, we made a homemade solution for a problem, and that's what we do here at the Stumpy Nubs Workshop. So, build your own. You can even pick up plans over at stumpynubs.com, and then you don't have to do all the figuring that I did with the sizes and all that good stuff. It's not as difficult to build as it looks. It actually only took me about 8 hours, and that included a lot of donut breaks. And while you're over at stumpynubs.com, check out all the other woodworking goodness we have going on over there. There's something new almost every day. In fact, it's a good place to sit back and have yourself a cold one, because you've earned it, my friend.